It's that time of the year again, where Valve says, screw whatever 40-hour-long title you just bought that was on sale. It's time to insert your quarters into the gachapon machine that is the world of Steam Next Fest demos. You may find something bad, you may find something amazing, you may just find something weird, but either way, you probably would have never found those games on your own. This is why Valve holds these virtual events, this particular one being the June 2022 edition of the Steam Next Fest. This is my third time queuing up a bunch of demos and figuring out what to get hype over, as well as what has good Linux support. But I really got into it this time. I downloaded over 40 demos. I sifted that number down to a smaller number of games worth showing off. Additionally, there were other titles that were good, but they were at the top of the demo charts, so I think most people that look at Next Fest games have heard of them already. So let's go through 12 of my lesser-known favorites, in descending order. So this first game, Blocky Dungeon, I almost don't want to say too much about it. It's very unique, and I almost feel like it's worth more just playing the demo to get a vibe of the game. But at its core, it's a simple puzzle sort of game, almost something you'd find on mobile, but not in a bad way, just it's sort of that demographic. You assemble a dungeon in a Tetris-like way. You need to consider your moves carefully in a specific way in order to do enough damage for combat, which feeds into clearing lines, which lets you finish the level. The game seemed to have some roguelite sort of modifiers to keep you coming back. This is one I just keep my eye on and see maybe if other people latch on to it after the final release. Now, since I'm primarily a PC Linux gamer, I want to emphasize the options menus of these games just a little bit and make sure that they can do everything you expect. This game had sort of the minimal needed for an acceptable game. You had your volume sliders, resolution picking, VSync toggle. Only thing really missing was bindings. That would be a major thing you'd want. Fabular was the next demo I tried. This game looks pretty cool, has its own little nice aesthetic pixel art going on. It's a pretty familiar structure of a game. It's basically the same structure as Faster Than Light. It's a roguelite-y sort of game, traveling in space, star to star, through a couple different systems. You know, once again, pretty much the same structure as Faster Than Light. But the difference here is that you're doing sort of weird Space Knight shift combat. So you're moving your own ship around in space, sort of jousting it, doing mostly melee combat with other ships. I mean, it's pretty interesting, although a bit difficult. And it wasn't the most immediately engaging to me. It was mostly, I guess, just sort of the speed at which ships move. But it did seem like the overall structure of this game, all the stuff that goes around that ship combat, makes it really a full engaging package. You've got a nice sort of upgrade system. There's both within the run upgrades, sort of like Faster Than Light. You got currency to spend in upgrade for stuff in that run, and then you have sort of larger things you can do once you die. I don't really have much else to say about it. It was just pretty good. Oh yeah, and before I forget, the options menu. This one was mostly just in the acceptable range. Under video settings, it was missing VSync resolution picking, which was kind of weird to me. Otherwise, as I said before, acceptable. The next demo I tried was not quite my thing, but I thought it was really unique, so I still want to talk about it. This is Corpse Keeper. I guess I could describe this as kind of a Dark Souls-y fighting game, roguelite thingy. Yeah. You can see it looks pretty unique. When you play it and you see it in motion, you notice it's really just a filter applied over sort of different assets. It's not like assets made in that art style, but still pretty nice looking. It's a very sort of grim, you know, dark game. I mean, you're a corpse keeper. What you do is you make an army of 3 corpses to try and fight in sort of individual rooms. Each room is a single fight against a single monster, which is sort of where the fighting game element comes in. It controls a bit like a fighting game as well. And it's pretty brutal. The difficulty is kind of high. I can barely get past one enemy in this demo, which is half of what makes it not quite my thing. There were also some performance issues. It could barely make 60 FPS on my computer. I definitely think for the right person, this is like the right game. I could see myself kinda enjoying this game. It's not completely impossible. You do sort of gain buffs over time back at your main base to give to your corpses that you'll use as an army. But I didn't really want to power through, but it was very, very unique. So, that's Corpse Keeper. And this game's options menu did something I haven't pointed out yet. It defaulted to mid-volume instead of the highest volume setting, which I actually really like. Thank you. 1C games do this more. Rest of the options menu, it was acceptable. It had just about everything you needed. It wasn't too in-depth. I didn't really see bindings was an issue. That was it. Continuing with the theme of uniqueness, I'll talk about Togges, or Togges. I didn't look up how to pronounce this one, but whatever this is a great block-based platformer. It gives me almost sort of a Pikmin or Katamari vibe in just how lighthearted it is. This game is kind of a 3D platformer. You sort of move your block around a level and try and figure out how to get all of certain items. These blocks sort of stack together, so it gives it sort of a puzzle vibe in that way. You gotta figure out how to build up or down. The levels seem pretty expansive. I could see parts of levels in the background, but the demo is actually pretty tiny. I couldn't play very much. What I saw was pretty good, pretty nice. This game even has RTX for some reason, although probably don't want it. Kind of tanks the performance. The performance of this game was just acceptable. I know I haven't been noting that for every game, but for this game it was acceptable. It does also have DLSS, that could be helpful. This game also has an acceptable options menu, I noticed. I didn't specifically see any key bindings, but I didn't really look for them. It's good. As I searched through demos, I was looking for a bunch of different boomer shooter FPS type games. This next one, Fashion Police Squad, jumped out at me. It has a very different presentation, sort of a goofy idea going along with it. You're a member of the Fashion Police, as the title says. The game has a pretty good presentation, graphic style. It's kind of Duke Nukem 3D-esque, where it's everything, it's an enemy as a sprite, and there's some voxel 3D stuff in the environment. Going along with the theme, you don't actually kill people in this game, you just give people good fashion, and then there's sort of an announcer that says stuff like handsome and sexy every time you get a frag. One downside of this game I found in playing it was that the level design seemed to be kind of straight lines. Now, this was a demo that was basically just the first level of the game, so that might not represent the final product that well, but it was definitely a big downside. The combat itself was good. You have some unique gun ideas, unique level traversal elements with the whip, that doubles as a grappling hook you can swing with. It was really just the level design that seemed to let the game down. You're just moving forward, doing combat. Additionally, at the end of the demo, there was a boss fight, and it was a pretty good boss fight for an FPS game. It was more akin to like a Mario game boss or something. Overall, this one was a pretty good experience in the demo. I want to keep this one on my wish list just to see what people say in the final reviews. If the level design in this is better and there's more exploration and secret finding, or at least it doesn't overstay its welcome with its straight line levels, then it would definitely be worth a play in the end. Being an FPS game, a fully featured options menu is pretty important, and this one has everything you need. FOV sliders, resolution picking, audio sliders, control rebinding, no complaints. The next demo up on the list didn't quite grab me looking at the Steam page, but I really wanted to try some sort of collectathon platformer, so I decided to try it anyways, that game being Koa and the Five Pirates. Now, despite it looking on the Steam page, it was actually a pretty fun game. It was a little collectathon platformer with simple Mario 3D World-esque level design. The levels were kind of simplistic, mostly move forward in them. There were some 2D segments that lock your movement in this demo. They were very minor areas though, but it was an interesting little mechanic. Additionally, there was a hub area you start off in this demo that at first seems pretty pointless, but then once you return to it after doing a couple levels, it then adds some quests and some stuff that unlocks for getting collectibles within the main levels that makes it a lot more interesting, and I want to see maybe what that's like in the full game. The movement in this game was interesting. It was actually pretty fun to move in. There's a rolling jump that's a core mechanic of the game, but it's not analog movement. You can tell that mouse and keyboard is in mind for this game. So you have a dedicated run button, sort of like Mario 3D World again. And if you try and just tilt the stick slightly on an analog stick on your controller, you won't walk. You'll just move at the same speed as pressing, W on the keyboard. It didn't seem that bad in this game. In some games it can make movement weird because it's completely impossible to turn around because the backwards key will just move you in that direction always. This game, it seemed to avoid that weirdness completely. It's partially the platforming areas just weren't that small, so you wouldn't notice it. You can't turn around the exact same way you would in a normal controller platformer though. Like in Mario 64, if you just tap the stick the opposite direction you're facing, then you can turn around and not actually move. Overall, I think this game wouldn't be a day one buy for me, but I do want to keep my eye on it. This is something that's up my alley. Oh, and yeah, I also ran into this funny bug in the hub world. I just forgot about it until I ran into it in the footage. Speaking of things that should be in the final game, I do think this game needs in the options menu key bindings and separate audio sliders for music and sound effects at least. Those were the only sort of core things that were missing in the options that I could tell. It is laid out kind of weird as well, but that's more nitpicky. The next demo I added to the list after filtering by Linux and finding a good Linux supported title that had some basic sort of Spartan pixel art as well. It sort of, looking at the screenshots, I thought, okay, this is like a single guy game dev, and he's spending more time, on the gameplay part, and he's got just acceptable enough art. That's sort of the vibe I got. I'm like, the gameplay is to be good in this one, and in trying it out, that was pretty true. Fountains is sort of an overhead Dark Souls sort of game, if you want to do a simple description. I'd say it's simpler and sort of a good, more appealing to more people sort of way. I didn't like Dark Souls 3 quite as much upon trying it. This game has pretty simplified combat. You just sort of swipe like in Zelda for attacks, and then for your defensive maneuvers, you mostly just wait on enemy attacks and then dodge roll them. I don't see that as a strict downside in its simplicity, it's just a more simple game. This aforementioned simplicity allows one to focus on just traversing the world instead. Individual enemies you find in the world will not be as much of a pain. I wandered for about a good 2 hours or so in this demo. There's lots of different items and upgrades to equip. I had to look for shopkeepers to use my money on, and parts of the world loop back around together or open up new paths. This game also has a water system that's unique. So the bonfire equivalent in this game gives you water, which you can use to heal multiple times, which I guess is another reason I found this easier than Dark Souls. And later on, you can also use this water for different spells, which means later on you'll need to juggle attacks versus healing, which is a nice little decision to make. Boss fights also are in this game, being a Souls-like game. There was one boss in the demo I was able to get to, and I did die a couple times and have to trek back to it and figure things out versus it. I definitely want to keep my eye on this game. I'm putting it on the wish list, and I want to see what other people think about it once it comes out. Finally, taking a look at the options menu for this game. This one is not quite a full PC gamer approved options list. There was no VSync or resolution settings, and there were no key bindings, at least. Those three things I think are at least bare minimum needed. It seems I played a bunch of boomer shooters and collectathons in the Next Fest, and Frogun falls in the latter genre of games. This game looked like a cute little PS1 era art style platformer, and this game delivered on that. The first thing I noticed when I was playing the game is that the movement feels kind of constrained. I guess that's because just of the perspective and the size of the levels, the ground seems made up of tiny squares, so you feel like you need to be more precise. Now, you don't move as quickly in this game as Koa. Instead, you rely primarily on your Frogun, or Frogun, which isn't as core to the game as the name implies. It feels almost. Like, it wasn't the main thing that I remember. It is still a thing you use a lot. There's an aiming in third-person system that's very satisfying to use. But really what you remember in this game is just the amount of retries you'll have to do to get all the collectibles, that's like the best part of the experience. Now, I mentioned retries. This game is a bit more difficult for those that like it like that. You don't keep your collectibles when you die, so you really gotta make sure you execute when you try a level. One of the levels even is a race. I really had to try a lot in that level. There's no life system, so you can just keep trying and trying again, though. Overall, I like this game a lot more than I thought I would. It's not quite like a buy it as soon as it comes out game, but I'm keeping my eye on it, like a lot of these. As for the options menu, it's got almost enough. I didn't see a VSync toggle, there were no control rebinding options. That's about it. Otherwise, good enough. The fourth of these I want to talk about is Beyond Sunset. This is a cyberpunky themed Doom 2 total conversion. So it's definitely a boomer shooter, you could say, but it has some Doom Eternal combat elements and platforming elements. So for example, for combat, you have like a chainsaw type item where you can get some health and armor drops in a pinch, as well as a bunch of movement abilities, some slides, some double jumps, things like that as well. Additionally, this game has a sword that's kind of unique. The bullets that enemies fire are projectiles, tiny projectiles, and you can reflect them with your sword. You specifically hit them. So that was very unique. You actually have to aim your sword to hit the tiny projectile bullets. And the bullets are projectiles in the first place, which makes them more fun to dodge. I found this game had pretty cool level design, at least for the first level. I prefer big mazes to explore in my FPS games, with combat being more secondary. And in this game, you'll have some sort of platforming, upper and lower levels to explore. As you explore, you'll find simple upgrade stations, which add just a bit more to do, a bit more to collect. And there are also little NPCs that you can help if you want. Helping them can be pretty beneficial, but is optional. One of the benefits I found is they'll help me in another realm of the game. Since it's cyberpunk, you've got decking into the net. And when you deck in, you go into a cool-looking realm that is like another game. This is in Doom 2 engine, and it transitions to what looks like another game. This is probably my favorite part of this. If you have an NPC help you, it might give you additional buffs in this realm. This realm is a bit more of a puzzle-based area, and its purpose is to sort of unlock doors and stuff in the real world. Now, there were some downsides I found in this demo. One of the big ones was just the fonts were hard to read in this, and it's a pretty reading-heavy game. You have NPCs to talk to, as I mentioned before, which is with text, and there's also, like, computers, like in Doom 3. I know for a fact that this can be made better, because there's, spoiler alert, another Doom engine game in this list that has text you can read. Additionally, another major thing I found is that this game lacks some game polish, I guess, for lack of better terms. The sound design was kind of off. I guess, like, the music and sound effects mix was a little weird. And there's a little bit of sort of narrative things keeping you in the game that I found off. So, to sort of outline what happens at the beginning of the game, you are a pod person, just dropped out of a pod somehow. You go through your little tutorial, which is nice, and then you go into sort of a hospital lobby area. At this point, you see some armor behind the desk. You assume probably, okay, you were naked, you pick up the armor. That actually, I think, is a nice little subtle storytelling thing. They could or could not be more direct with that sort of your dressing up scenario. Additionally, the one NPC that's here tells you, hey, you're not wanted, not supposed to talk to you. That's sort of it, so you kind of know something's up, but not much. You just sort of wander around at that point, you find your first gun, you walk out of the room that has the gun, and the enemy spawn and the game really starts. Which was kind of jarring to me. These enemies literally do just appear out of nowhere. They don't have a spawn effect. A big thing I was thinking would help is there's no like voice over the intercom or chatter from the enemies you can hear where they say, hey, this is an escaped person, an unwanted person, let's get him. That would have made a lot more sense to me. Nevertheless, I found this pretty cool, and I'm going to keep it on the wish list and see what reviews have to say about the final product. And one last thing I want to add on, since I'm a PC and Linux gamer, I gotta talk about the options menu. This is a Doom 2 engine game on GZ Doom, so it's got all the options you need, key rebinds, volume, no complaints. Continuing in the collectathon vein is the game Pocket Wheels I want to feature, which I did try a little bit after the Next Fest ended, but I wanted to slide it in here since it actually still participated in the Next Fest. I guess shout out to Gaming on Linux for covering this game, because otherwise I wouldn't have seen it. I guess there's more proof just making Linux versions can help filter your game out through the masses on Steam. Now this game is basically Mario Odyssey, but with a car. The one level in the demo is just a large area. You've got coins to collect and stars, which in this game are batteries. The coins you collect can get you cosmetics and everything. You'll think, why are you a car as you're playing this though sometimes it feels like you want more precise movement than driving, at least in this first level. But there are side areas, sort of like in Odyssey, where being a car makes a lot more sense. These side areas are races and destruction derbies, and so being a car actually feels pretty good. I guess it really depends on how later levels are designed, on whether being a car is actually a good fit for the game. Additionally, I found this game was lacking a little bit of, final game polish. It wasn't as bad as Beyond Sunset, but the big issue I had was there was no feedback on batteries. There's no, get animation. Mario Odyssey, you even have, the text, the name of the star you get, which can reaffirm, how you got that star if it's named, the golf ball in the hole. I guess a little spoiler there. If it was named that, then you would verify, oh, I did do this correctly, which this game doesn't do. On the Odyssey thought, there's also no fast travel. The checkpoints are flags in this game, just like that game. And it's a little tricky to get around, so there not being fast travel is a bit confusing. Since I'm talking about getting around, I'll talk about the core movement in this game as well. So you got your driving like a car, you have boosts sort of like Rocket League. There's no double jumps like Rocket League though. Instead you have a glider, which I'm not sure what to think. I almost feel like a double jump would help you be a little more precise in your movement. And there is also a grappling hook thing, but it doesn't really come up that often in the demo, so I'm not really sure what to think about it all the way. Overall, this was a fun little experience in this demo. I wishlisted this game, possibly with intent just to getting it kind of day one. It's not on the back burner as much as some of the other games I've looked at. As for the options menu, this one was pretty spot on. It had basically everything you needed. It was kind of lacking granularity for graphics options just to help scalability, although this game's pretty low-res looking it seems anyways. But, gotta give it the PC gaming stamp of approval. The next game I want to talk about is Paradise Marsh. So I saw this game in the Wholesome Games Direct thing. It was a very nice looking game, had a nice style to it, so I decided to try the demo. When I tried the demo, it just put me straight into the action. You got a little bug net, and you need to catch a ton of different critters. All sorts of fun critters. You got frogs, tadpoles, I could catch cute bees, well, except for the demo has a little wall that kept me from catching bees. Kind of upsetting, but there were other nice things to catch. Once you get towards the end of the demo, you'll figure out that the catching the critters has a purpose. Once you get a certain number, you'll unlock certain things. I wasn't really able to figure this out fully because the demo only lets you see so much, but what was there was pretty good. It seemed like in this game you'll do a lot of cool exploring, a lot of trying to figure things out in the environment. Like there were some creatures like spiders where I couldn't just run up to them and catch them. I had to do a little bit more. Lots of mysterious things in this marsh that I guess is the location of the game. So yeah, I'm keeping a lookout for this one on the wish list. And lastly to note, this game actually had the options menu disabled, so hopefully you had no issues with the game picking the right monitor or anything. A game I'm probably not even going to wait for reviews in the final product and just grab is Dome Keeper. I may not really need to gush about this game too much, it was more towards the top of the demo leaderboard. I saw this game by filtering by Linux, and then saw this one was actually pretty cool looking, just in visuals. The art and aesthetic is pretty nice. Upon booting this game, I found that me watching the trailer for the game beforehand was kind of essential, as the game itself doesn't really guide you well for a first time. When you boot up the game for the first time, you'll be placed in your sort of home dome, and you'll have a mine to go down. You need to go down in Minecraft, and then return to your home dome, at some point and fight off some scary things that show up, but there's really no indicator for this for a newbie. So you could wind up just digging and digging, and then just the game says you're dead, and then just do that over and over and wonder what the heck is going on. What's supposed to happen is that once you've mined certain materials, you can buy an upgrade, which actually does give you an indicator for when the monsters come, and this feeds into the full fun gameplay loop. Once you're fully engaged with this gameplay loop, and you have that indicator, you'll figure out you need to manage your time digging, trying to maximize each trek, and then come back up, fight, and rinse repeat. It did seem like there was a little more to this loop as well. I missed this part, but I did notice on other people's streams of this game that there were some other objects I could have messed with. There was a little touch in this game too that was pretty cool, where if you played on the lower difficulty, as opposed to the higher difficulty, the sort of setting of the game itself changed. On the harder difficulty, you're on sort of a dark, completely ruined planet, whereas on the slightly easier difficulty, it's more of just an empty desert in the daytime, and it's not as dreary. Once it comes out, this probably is just going to be the just one more run game that I play. This game has basically a fully featured options menu, which is pretty nice. It doesn't have to have certain graphics options since it's a 2D game. It is missing a resolution selection thing, which is a little weird, although it does have a nice little 1-to-1 pixel scaling option since it's pixel art. It had key bindings and everything else you need. I approve. So that long list of games was all the games that I really liked, really want to keep my eye on, think they will do good things in the future. Now I've got a couple games that I want to succeed, but I was not completely impressed by the demo. The first of these games that I feel conflicted on is Diluvian Ultra, which definitely looks pretty cool. It's a nice pixely, dark, moody FPS. And it's got some things I've never seen in an FPS before that are nice. That you have, like, JRPG style dialogue. Your guns are actually, like, alien bugs. And, like, one of them, to reload it, you just pet it. I mean, that's pretty cute. But, unfortunately, there are too many downsides that I just didn't like. The core thing I found is that the level design overall was just kind of unclear in this game. I don't know exactly how to put it, but you kind of just walk forward and then you will get stuck and not really understand where to go next a lot. This happens a little one too many times in the demo. Additionally, this game has a blood system, which feeds into checkpoint areas where you can level up. You can see on the screen here there's a bunch of different stats and attributes you could level up, a lot of numbers. However, whenever you die in the level, you lose one level up in the bar here. And additionally, this blood thing, I'm not really completely sure how it works. The game doesn't convey it that well, but you'll just go into bloodlust, which is bad. It's kind of just a weird thing I didn't think added to the game. I didn't really think the permadeath thing, there's a permadeath mechanic in this that doesn't add anything either. So not only does dying lose you level ups, but after a certain point, you just can't respawn again, and you have to restart the level. I guess this combined with the fact that the game doesn't have difficulty settings and unclear levels just made it painful to get through, despite the cool environment in your bug friend guns. Kity Builder is another game I was conflicted on. This one is the exact opposite mood as Diluvian Ultra. This is a nice, happy-looking, PS1 era almost looking, cute game. Great presentation. This game, despite the name being Builder and the trailer just showing you building stuff, this is mostly a collectathon in disguise. You're like picking up your blueprints of building, picking them up, and then you can sort of build as you want, as well as use the buildings to help you progress through the world, which is kind of not intuitively shown to you, but you figure it out pretty well. The main issue with this game is that the building in this game is pretty aimless, aside from just using buildings as platforms to get places or making bridges. There's nothing else you can really do. You could build a whole city with a park like it shows in the trailer, and this does cause NPCs to walk around, but they don't do anything, doesn't help you. Maybe in later levels, these NPCs that spawn in cities will help you get through certain obstacles, but right now it seems like the buildings don't cause any meaningful interactions. It reminds me almost of Animal Crossing Happy Home Designer, where It's just sort of a sandbox, make stuff look pretty game, but there's no objectives, which makes it kind of uninteresting. Master Key was an interesting looking game I ran across by filtering by Linux. This game is obviously trying to be a Zelda game. You can feel this out as soon as you start playing. But the black and white graphics just make it way too hard to see. Something about the sprite style and the black and white graphics, I couldn't make out anything and it just kept me from wanting to progress. There was an interesting design choice in this game where there's no text at all. So there's dialogue, but it's actually just, you know, emojis, pictograms, which makes it a more cryptic puzzly game than actual Zelda even. Now it's time to talk about some of the more popular demos, the ones that were at the top of the charts in the Steam Next Fest page. I feel like most people have heard about these ones, so that's why I saved them. First one I want to talk about is Cult of the Lamb. This was a nice roguelite game, really good style. Basically Animal Crossing x Hades. Okay, really Dragon Quest Builders x Hades, but that's not as funny to say. Really, I just had that joke, that's why I wanted to bring it up. The only other well-known title I wanted to talk about was Selaco. This is a Doom Engine FPS as well, and this had all the game polish you wanted. Nice little intro cutscene, lots of dialogue in a readable font this time. Cool levels to explore. The only weak thing I found was the boss fight at the end, but I can't wait to see what this one is when it releases. There were a lot of demos, popular games, and not so popular games that I did play, but I don't think they're worth really saying anything about because they just weren't quite my thing. They might be your thing, so still check them out. I'll flash them on screen here with the names. In the meantime, let me summarize the big ol' list of Steam Next Fest games I just talked about. There are really only 3 demos that I know I'll buy first thing when their games release. Those games were Dome Keeper, Selaco, and Paradise Marsh. Those ones, just the demo alone, engrossed me into the game. There's a couple games I'm very, very interested in, and depending on how the reviews for the game are, I'll probably get these games. Those games are Pocket Wheels, Togges, Koa, Fountains, and Frogun. So I guess overall that concludes my roundup of the June 2022 Steam Next Fest. It's still a pretty good event. Steam wishlist is getting huge. Lots of titles to keep my eye on, as I've said several times. Said not keep my eye on a lot in this video, probably. There might even be a counter. I may skip covering the next edition of this just to take a little break. It's a bit of effort actually going through so many demos. We'll see. The next one I believe would be in the fall, around October or so. I did think and look back at some of the previous Next Fest titles I've talked about. Deep Rune, I went and bought that one right after it released. It was a pretty good purchase, pretty cheap one, so that one was an easy commit. There probably will even be a video on that game incoming because I just liked it that much and want more eyes on it. I did notice that the Peglin game that I tried in one of the Next Fests also blew up and is pretty popular now, so it's nice to see that kind of thing. But most of the games from the last Next Fest are actually still in early access or haven't released flat out. So we'll have to see in the next couple of years what of these Next Fest games are substantial. Before I throw you to a black screen, I do want to try and point you guys to the subscribe button, or at least my previous Next Fest videos, so you can dig for even more games if you want. If you really want to dig even further, you can find the link to my VODs channel, and then you can find the live stream VODs from when I tried all these games in this video live, and as well as a couple games I didn't talk about. And that's really it for this video now, and take care. Peace.